So let's start with a perspective from you, Vera. Where do you come at this problem from?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this fantastic place. And thank you for this challenge to compete with the fatigue after lunch. So please be brave.
We have a full room.
Yes, I admire that. And well, I was in the Commission responsible for many different things, including justice and protection of values like democracy. And here comes the issue of corruption, because corruption is always mentioned by the citizens when they are asked why they are less and less trusting democratic system. And they say there is a very strong feeling. We have a feeling of unfairness, injustice, inequality, and abuse of power from the side of those who won elections. And when I received this topic, I started to study back the directive against corruption, which was in fact written by me and my team. We can go back to that, but I will now spare you of that. I would like to zoom out a little bit and look at the system in which corruption has a tendency to flourish. And I will quote Anne Applebaum, who said that now we are in the era of predators, the leaders, the governors, the people who think that they got a mandate from the God, and they want to govern and lead without any limitations. And here comes the second quote of Lord John Acton, who said that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. And here comes our trouble in the EU, but not only in the EU member states, because we see that together with the effort to increase the power and get rid of the limitations, we see the weakening of the role and power of the media, the attacks on judiciary and dismantling of independent judiciary. Dismantling is too strong, but effect or negative pressure on judiciary in several member states. And we need a weakening voice of the civil society. These are three uncomfortable actors for those who want to govern without any limit. And I wanted to give you this context because I think that if somebody says we have to take a very successful action against corruption, we need at the same time to protect those who have the role in the society to control those in power. And I think that it's quite obvious that, as I said, in the European Union we have increased distrust of people in the democratic system, and that's why the European Union, the Commission, introduced a lot of measures to stop the trend, to support the media, to support the civil society, and to protect the judiciary, and to act against those who really are obviously abusing the power. And here I will stop here because I know I should be short, but I will use the example of Hungary because in Hungary, Viktor Orbán introduced or developed over 16 years the system of unlimited power. And OLAF, the European Office on Investigating fraud, reported really many very serious cases of corruption and fraud. And it resulted in stopping the EU funding going to Hungary. And it was unprecedented. It happened in case of Poland before, but for Hungary, still before elections now, the EU froze 19 billion euro. So I just want to tell you that we have a lot of, I would say, more or less efficient tools to decrease corruption. We, from the EU or the Commission level, pushed the member states to have the anti-corruption strategies, to have the digitalized registers of the public procurements, to have a good related legislation. And at the same time, when it doesn't work, the EU has the way how to really punish the corruption in the member state by stopping the EU money. So we are not helpless, but it is never the end of the story, because it will always be the case that there will be corruption cases. And maybe I will stop here. I promise I will stop. I come from the country which went through the revolution in 1989. I come from Czechia, or those days Czechoslovakia. I remember the times when it was a kind of publicly accepted position or a feeling that corruption is inevitable and is normal. Only after the society gets rid of this, after there is a very clear feeling or also statement from the side of politics, and media go after the cases. So after this changes and it's clear that corruption is unacceptable and has to be punished, only in such country you can really decrease the level of corruption.
So I'm glad you mentioned that final actor, which is the popular opinion, because you can have all the rules you like, but unless there are norms of popular understanding, and obviously in Hungary eventually the voters threw out the government, but it's surely, and this just very briefly because our time is limited, but isn't it also the case that rather alarmingly often now there is this sense, even in advanced democracies, that everybody does it and it's no longer as shocking as it used to be? Or am I being unfair? Do you think people are as shockable as ever?
You think people are shocked about what?
I think that people are, I'm suggesting that people are less shocked than perhaps one would hope they would be by certain levels of corruption, precisely because of the similar, it's not only in old communist systems where people accept that it's normal.
I would say that in some member states there is a high level of resignation.
Yeah.
And some kind of lethargy, something like we have ourselves too much on our plates, so the people are afraid about the future, and they maybe don't have enough energy or attention to focus on what's happening in the public life. And of course also they have, sorry to say it, but their brains and hearts and stomachs are full of what they read and see on social media. So I think that in some member states this is lethargy combined with the lack of attention. In some member states, and I will not name and shame, but in some we still see very demanding citizens who are not going through any resignation. They are demanding, they are asking questions, they are punishing their politicians in the elections. When they fail, they just change them. And this is how democracy should work, and this is how democracy, which deserves the trust of people, should work.
Very good. Pierre Moscovici.
Well, I will also start with some elements of context. We are living in a world where the global order is under strain, for rivalry between major powers, and we see also a dangerous disregard for international norms. And in this moment, especially, I think we would need, I would say, principled leaders and strong independent institutions that act with integrity to protect the public interest. And that's what corruption clearly damages. We have what Vera showed a minute ago, which is often called illiberal democracy. And we have a kind of a rule of impunity. And impunity means that you have the exercise of power without accountability, which becomes in its clearest form the commission of crimes without punishment. This is what corruption is about. And when you think or reflect on the relationship between corruption and the limits of democracy, what should we do? I think that we've got four major effects that demonstrate that corruption distorts democracy. The first one is what Vera ended with, is that it depresses democratic participation. Study after study demonstrates that people are significantly less likely to vote when they view the political system as corrupt, because they believe, well, everybody does that way, we cannot trust anybody, so we don't even go to the polls. That is obviously the first effect. And to be clear, corruption's impact on democracy are not limited to places widely seen as chronically corrupt. And if we look at our EU globally, and without any name and shame, we see that it is a problem that we face in Europe too. The second dimension is a diminishment of citizens' willingness to punish corrupt leaders on the ballot box. Well, sometimes it happens, and rightly so, what happens in Hungary, but it was a really a bunch of people who confiscated all power in their favor, and that is as well media, politics, and economics.
And state administration.
And state administration. And this creates a cycle of wrongdoing goes unpunished. That's the second effect. The third one is that it's got a wider effect. It diminishes the quality and extent of government services. It decreases citizens' approval of the government all over the place. And for example, corruption has been shown to limit tax revenues, to increase government expenditures through off-box transactions, and also limits the efficiency of public administration, and it decreases what we can invest in social programs or education, which are our priorities, and it's also the case for environment. And the fourth effect is that the erosion of trust feeds directly into rising political polarization. As allegations of corruption proliferate, partisans become more inclined to view the opposition side not only simply as competitors, but also as enemies. You are the corrupt part, we are the corrupt part. And after all, nobody can decide. And so everybody's black in this situation, and democracy itself fades. And so corruption clearly is a mark of the limits of democracy. As I said before, of course we can see the world where countries are obviously corrupted. But it's also true in the Occident. There is a coalition about the US. We can see today the US also has a confiscation of power, and we can see that corruption is all over the place, I would say at the highest level. And this creates a problem for all of us. Corruption is not absent in Europe. Well, in Greece, I'm not going to talk a lot about Greece, although I've been involved in trying to solve the Greek program a few years ago. I would say that, certainly there have been efforts to contain corruption, but there are also changes in the form of corruption, and the European Public Prosecutor is still investigating on some cases in this country. In my own country, France, well, we've had a few laws, but it does not prohibit corruption to exist. And so, I will end by that. I believe, like Vera, that the involvement of the public opinion and civil society is major. It happens in some countries, you mentioned Albania, you also mentioned Macedonia. Gen Z feels that corruption is not acceptable. I'm afraid to say that in other countries like mine, they feel indifferent to what happens. As you may have seen, it's not about corruption, but it's about, I would say, an abuse of public position due to public money. Yesterday, there was an important decision. Madame Le Pen decided to run. I'm not going to comment that here, but obviously, we'll see in a few days whether people feel that's a game changer, that they cannot elect somebody who has been condemned. I'm afraid they will say that's not a problem. and Gen Z doesn't seem to be mobilized. That's why we clearly need to act, continue to act, as well at the European level, the international level, and the national level.
So you mentioned the example, a very striking and very current example of Marine Le Pen. And the question, the crucial question, as you say, is what will voters, and it relates back to what we were discussing earlier, is the electorate sufficiently outraged by examples of misuse of funds, or whether you call it corruption or not, but this is someone who was convicted of a crime. If the voters don't care, what does that tell us about democracy?
Well, to be clear, I don't want to create any dispute here. The case of Madame Le Pen is not a case of corruption, since she has not used, and her party has not used, public money for private matters. And so that's not involved in this case.
Is that the only definition of corruption?
No, I think that's the main definition of corruption, but it's different. They have used public money in favor of politics. Yes. And they did not respect, if the condemnation is right, now she's more than in appeal, she is still before the courts, and her innocence has to be demonstrated, but they've used the money for a matter that was derived from the purpose of this money. Again, I don't know. I'm afraid that the public opinion will be indifferent to that. And that says a lot about the trust of the people on their political appointees, and in politics and in democracy. And that's why the fight against corruption is as well legal, but it's also political, and it's societal. We need to have the three approaches together. We need to have laws that enforce the fight against corruption. We need to have a politics that is as clean as possible and clean. And we need to have a civil society which matters about those issues.
Very good. Well, Makis Voulidis, as we've heard, of course, Greece has not been immune from this problem. How do you see this, the current state of play in Greece, and the actions to at least limit the problem?
We speak in Greek or in English?
If you want to speak in Greek, we have translation. So if you prefer, it's as you like.
It's okay. So, I'd say, in my view, there is no dilemma actually here, corruption or not corruption. Obviously, we will all agree that corruption is a big issue, and I think we'll all agree that we have to deal with it. And it's important to say, leaving from there, we need to speak about specific policies that really could limit corruption. I was serving as Minister of Interior when I implemented the law for internal auditing in all ministries. Then we had, that's not enough, we had to train people as internal auditors, and that's not enough. Then we have to have a specific plan of internal audits, so we get to a specific result. And then we have to monitor what we do. So this is actually a constant struggle in that. I am also the minister who legislated the law about lobbying in our ministry. And again, there are questions of definition of what lobbying is and what is a lobbyist. So I think that this is going to be an open discussion. Other issues are always in raise. I'm proud to say that during this government mandate, actually our country has risen in all international organization evaluations. Greece is one of the 26 mature democracies in the 150-something countries. I should take out this, okay. Also, I think Greece managed to gain more positions, 11 better positions in the international transparency evaluation. So there are a lot of things that have been carried out. The relation with media, the relation with the judiciary, and all that is quite important. But I must raise also one thing that, in my view, is also a great danger in the fight for corruption. And there you have to strike a very clear balance, and one has to be cautious. And that concerns not only politicians, but also I'm a lawyer by profession. So yesterday, actually, what a coincidence, someone came to my cabinet, and he was a prominent businessman. He was dealing with defense business, and he had defense contracts. This man was accused. He was incarcerated for 6 months. Then he spent another 12 months in a house arrest with
Tag.
the bracelet.
Yeah.
He was accused in 10 cases of fraud, and he was acquitted in all 10. This was something that started in 2014, and it ended at 2021. The guy had companies evaluated of 800 million euros at the moment of his incarceration. Of course, after his incarceration, the stock value went down. He had loans coming from the banks. The banks said that now they're not secure. They asked the loans. The guy is completely destroyed. And now, after 10 acquittals, do you know, Commissioner, how much money he's going to get for compensation from the Greek side? 1,500 euros for each month of incarceration. 9,000 euros for a complete destruction of a fortune of 800 million. And the case I'm having now is how I'm going to raise claims against the Greek states for that. So why I'm saying that? Because one has to be very cautious also on the other side. Because something that populist politicians most likely will do is throw accusations all over, and then, if you're not careful with that, then you have a complete delegitimization of the whole political class. So this really, one has to be very, very careful, and the judiciary has to be very careful on that, on the accusations. And the media, they have to be very careful on that. So there is a balance that you have to keep there. I'll give an example concerning the EPPO. So recently, we had 13 cases of members of parliament.
EVPO, what is the EVPO?
Is European Public Prosecutor's Office,
okay,
which is a relatively new European institution, and it is supposed to try and find fraud with Olaf. Olaf, we do know. So those are the two institutions that they are trying now. The EPPO has the criminal side of you, and they are trying to safeguard the, let's say, the European money and the European funding on the way that they are being used. So, okay, Greece is part of EPPO. Recently, we had a case, very interesting one, in the Greek Parliament, where we have a system of immunity for our MPs. So we had to lift the immunity in order to go to prosecution because the EPPO asked for that. And what's happening after we've done that in the Parliament? In the 13 cases, with evidence coming from the EPPO, but after the demand for lifting the immunity, in most cases, it comes out that there is no damage. But the political damage has been done. The opposition has used that. So I think that there we have to be very careful on how one will use all that. And yes, we have to be very committed in dealing with corruption. We have to build the institutions that are dealing with corruption. This government is doing that. But on the other hand, one should hold accountable all those people who very easily point the finger. And then I must say the damage that's being done, it's not, well, it's the case of the businessman I told you about, but for politicians also, there's a huge danger that they are involved in long legal disputes, maybe political careers are being destroyed. And at the end of the day, we see, no political result. Even in the case of a member of parliament coming from the socialists in European Union, I remember Mrs. Kaili, a Greek European. She was incarcerated, I think, for 2 months in the Qatar issue. 4 years after, we still have no prosecution. Okay. Now, these are examples of how things could go, seriously bad, and how one must be very careful on this issue.
Thank you.
So there are this balance.
It's complicated. I can see it's also quite good for your law business because you get these cases to prosecute. But it's certainly complicated. Milena Apostolaki from a different side of the political spectrum. Give us your perspective.
Correct. Well, 70% and even more of the Greek people considered that corruption is one of the major issues in Greek society. We have, of course, issues that has to do with economy, the high prices, but then corruption is the second most important issue.
Can I just ask, has that changed, or is that a fairly
yes,
consistent?
absolutely. It's changed. That was not constant. It's something that has to do with the current situation, and I would also say the current government, and the way the government reacted to major scandals. I would say that due to this modus operandi of the current government and to this huge lack of trust regarding the functioning of public institutions, also regarding the leadership of justice, there is a big a strong trust, which is now towards European institutions like the EPPO. And I should say also that this 70% believe that all these revelations regarding these scandals were the result of this intervention, the intervention of the EPPO and its services. So there is a huge problem in Greece. Today, I should add that there was another evolution regarding one of these scandals of the wiretapping. The problem begins when corruption is not the exception. When corruption, it's the rule. It's the modus operandi. When everybody feels, and strongly feels, that those who had no political access or political or economic power will find a way to escape. And of course, this has to do, first of all, with politicians, because there are some laws, even preventions in our constitution, which I should say that I share that you need to have this kind of limits. But you also need to try not to protect, but try to enhance accountability, try to enhance transparency, try to enhance the outcome that everyone is will not have the privilege against the law, and that was not the case regarding all these scandals. the scandals regarding the tragedy of the railway station, the agricultural scandal, the scandal with wiretapping. And this lack of political will, which is something that I believe that we can loudly say that this is the case here in our country. There's not a lack of laws or a lack in our constitution. We have laws that are, I should say, adequate. We have a constitution with clauses that can face all these issues and problems, but there is a lack of political will, and that I should say that there is a clear and huge responsibility.
So you gave some examples of the current government of issues that have arisen under the current government. Would you also accept that it is a cross-party, that previous governments have had the similar level of corruption, or is it your contention that things have got worse?
Absolutely. I'm not telling that, as I told you, this is not a Greek problem, this is not a European problem, it is a global problem. Mm-hmm. And there are several governments, we have governments during past years where absolutely we had several problems with corruption. The previous government, even other governments during the past years. But now we have this current government, its mandate lasts for 7 years. It has been a long, long time, and they could really face the problems. They could really present a better example. They could really present a strong political will, and they didn't.
Okay. Now, perhaps, George Batsakis, you could put this all into perspective for us from an academic point of view. How should we be thinking about this whole nexus of corruption that we've been hearing about?
Yeah, I think the positive thing about myself standing here on this panel is that I think I'm quite more objective in terms of not belonging to a party or studying a particular science or a topic of interest, which in this particular case is, of course, corruption. I would like to start with a position related to how academics see and evaluate corruption in general. And corruption, in my view, is something integrated, probably embedded well in deeper institutions. So we always see corruption as the outcome of weak institutions in a country, in a nation. So in essence, corruption is the outcome of a weak democracy. And that's why when I was introduced to the topic of this panel initially, I thought that this is not a one-directional kind of relationship. It is more likely a reverse kind of relationship that goes both ways. So corruption, yes, can actually decrease the efficiency of a democracy. It can damage democracy. At the same time, weak democracies can actually cause the possibility of having more incidents of corruption in a country. And this takes me to the next part of my position here, which is related to how Europe in general has responded to incidents of corruption and how it deals with institutions in general. And I think that Europe is actually standing very well across the globe. I will cite a very well-known index, the CPI index, Corruption Perceptions Index is the actual title, which is published biannually by Transparency International. And we clearly see that throughout all these years, the European Union is averaging much higher than any other kind of bloc of countries or country in the world.
So to be clear, averaging higher is a good thing, not more corruption, but less corruption.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because there is a positive side here and the negative side. I will come to the negative side of things. The positive side of things is that the EU is doing pretty well. In general, democratic states, strong democracies, score very high, on average 71 points. Flawed democracies score around 56, 57 on average. And then you have the case of failed states, or let's say democracies that have not managed to stand to the level that the citizens anticipated them to stand, which score actually less than 40 or 35 points. Now, this is a good thing. The bad thing is, of course, the fact that instead of enjoying and experiencing a higher degree of convergence within the European Union, we see that throughout the years we experience a higher degree of divergence. So many nation states, many countries are actually showing signals of weakness, of not being capable of standing to the level required. And Greece is a case, for example, which we are probably somewhere below the European Union average. I think we score around 50, 52 points. We have seen some progress throughout in the last few years, but we're still lagging behind the major European Union countries which are scoring very well on that side. So I think this is something that politicians and in general institutions need to pay attention to, because we all know that, at least in my mind, corruption is essentially tightly linked to a strong institution. And when corruption exists, simply citizens will start losing trust in the governments, in the politicians, in the institutions, which is even worse. So I think there are three main, let's say, mechanisms that a government can utilize in this process. First, being impartial. It's very important. Second, a government needs to be transparent. When something bad happens, when a scandal erupts, you need to take action. You need to show to the citizens that you care about it. You will follow up on this. You will not let this happen again. And third, and most importantly, I think it's accountability. Politicians, governments, institutions should be accountable. And if we lose that, then we will be experiencing a continued, let's say, process in which citizens, businesses, organizations will not show the required level of trust towards institutions.
Well, thank you. I think the Transparency International measures are very helpful in the absence of other ones. It's an area where we could badly do with sort of, even more data, I think. Listen, our time is very, very short. I want to ask you each, give you each an opportunity, perhaps in 1 minute, to comment on any aspect of what others have said, or for final thoughts from you on the whole issue, because we've had a lot of very interesting perspectives. So yeah, perhaps Vera, you go first.
I would like to use the minute for telling you my personal story. I was in jail for corruption on the basis of false accusation. It took me 2 years to get out of the process, and another 4 years to be the ground witness to put to jail those who accused me and who damaged my life. And because I hated my media picture of a corrupted, how to say it? I will quote, yeah, corrupted swine, or later the judiciary error, I wanted to do something bigger than that, and that's why I became the European Commissioner for Justice.
Fantastic.
So, but maybe
can we expect the Netflix series on your case?
I don't know. They don't want it. But maybe to react on the number of states, European states, which rank highest in the Transparency International. Denmark, Finland, Luxembourg, Sweden, Netherlands, Ireland, Estonia, Germany. When you look into who is governing in those countries, there is a higher percentage of women in the political positions. So I cannot help it. It's not a coincidence.
So you think correlation and causation are good
Look into
statistician
that.
method? Yes. Yeah, Moscovici.
Just two short comments. The first one is about what you said, Minister. Of course, somebody is accused has to be considered as innocent as long as he or she is not condemned. And judicial errors exist. But still, we need to trust the judicial institutions when they are solid, when themselves are not corrupted. And I would say that we need also to respect the work of EPO, which is globally serious, and the task to make sure that the public European money is well spent is, of course, of high importance. So that's my first remark. The second one is about what you said, Professor. It's about politics. Yes, a government needs to be transparent, needs to be impartial, needs to be accountable. Accountability is certainly the main word here. And not to contradict you, Vera.
Don't you dare.
It's true that certainly the governments you mentioned are led more often than others by women. But it's also true that these countries have a long-lasting culture of accountability, which is not the case of other countries. And I've noticed that some, I would say, Mediterranean countries are not in that, among those who are in the best place.
Thank you.
You know, maybe the problem is that, you know, my profession as a criminal lawyer, why I'm telling you why that. Because I don't have a general, let's say, trust or distrust to anyone. I'm just checking the work that's being carried out. So I want to see the work. When I see, you know, a nicely built, let's say, criminal accusation, I'm a defense lawyer, so I'm trying to do my best, but there I see, you know, a serious case. But on the other hand, when I don't see that, I will say that. I will say that. And that's why I'm saying that it's very important that all parts understand their responsibilities here. It's not just the political system, but it's also the judiciary. They must understand their responsibility. And the media, they must understand their responsibility. So this is a third, let's say, project, and it's a very sensitive one, in order to build trust. I'll give you one example, very, you know, quick one. We had this horrible accident at Tempe with 57 people died. And there was, you know, if you start asking people 2 years ago, was there a cover-up for the responsible people that had to be accountable in this horrible accident? 80% of people would say that, you know, there was some horrible conspiracy. Why? But there was a huge explosion, and things were carried in there, and someone was trying to hide the people who were carrying all this secret stuff that used this explosion. Okay. For 2 years, our government has been accused of this cover-up. After 2 years, then of course the judiciary acted and said, well, there was no such horrible thing that was being carried that led to the explosion. But 80% of the people at that time were absolutely convinced that we were covering up. This is why I'm telling you, this is a complex equation. Yes, it's the accountability of the politicians, but also it's the responsibility of the media, and also in the responsible work of the judiciary. So we must not leave any, you know, part of this triangle, you know, out of the discussion. Everything should be discussed, and I think it's quite important, in order to have efficient work and in order to truly hold accountable those who really are.